Hi there. It's very nice to see you today, and thank you for listening to the talk. My name is Joanne, and I'm the Director of Studies with ATC Language Schools. And today I'm going to talk to you about assessment for learning. Now we have 3 session objectives for this, okay? And you're going to decide which session objective you're going to hit, okay? So, the first session objective is that all teachers in the room, every one of you, will gain an overview of assessment for learning techniques. The next session objective is that most teachers will try assessment for learning in future lessons. And finally, some of you, the gifted and talented in the room, will conduct further research into assessment for learning to integrate into your lessons. So you can decide now which objective is best for you. If you're feeling very tired after chanting about bears and learning lots of methodology, you can just go for the general one. Or if you're feeling really enthusiastic and you've had your coffee and you're ready to go, you can try the most or the some objective, whichever you prefer. So the first thing I want you to think about, you don't need to write anything down, just think about it, okay? Assessment for learning, what I know. So just think about it yourself. What do I know about assessment for learning? If you know nothing, that's fantastic for me, I'm happy. But if you know something, try and refresh in your mind what you know. What I want to know. So think about your own objectives for this session. What do you want to gain from this session? And what I've learnt, we'll go to that at the end. We'll talk about that when we're finished, okay? Keep this in mind. What I know, what I want to know, and what I've learnt. So how useful is assessment anyway? In ATC, we have had a real revamp of how we assess students. And here's a question that comes up, how useful is it? So to test out, or to try and answer this question, I'm going to assess you. So I hope you've had your coffee and you're feeling sprightly, okay? In front of you, you have a mini whiteboard, okay? You need to pair up, you need to sit with somebody, so you're in twos. So for example, 2 and 2, 2 and 2, 2 and 2. So make sure you have one person that you can speak to. You have 10 seconds to find your partner.
Okay, no objection.
Okay, so we have partner. It's okay, you can be.
Okay.
Okay, does everybody have one person or even 2 people to speak to? Yeah? Okay, excellent. If you're in a group, if you're in a paired group, one teacher will draw a house, okay? If you're in a group of 3, 2 people will draw the house, okay? So, house drawers, remember, if you're in a pair, only one draws the house. If you're in a 3, 2 people draw the house. So I need your attention. When you draw your house, use the entire card and your whiteboard pen, okay? The final person, you will assess the house. You're going to decide if that house is the most fantastic architectural structure you've ever seen, or if it's absolutely useless, okay? So, artists, you have 1 minute. 1 minute, go. Or use the back.
I can't do better.
Okay, so you okay, let us.
She knows her limits.
Okay, that's a very fine thing.
Do I have to first read? Is this the first?
No, well,
Artists,
let's wait
you
and,
have
ask
30
Joanne.
seconds.
I'm
30
not sure what
seconds.
the principal will handle all this yeah.
Practical.
Okay, and some fossil fuel burners inside. Not useless anymore.
I see something right. Something is good on that picture. It is good.
There are a lot of good things in this picture, yeah.
These houses look excellent.
They're very competitive.
Yeah, I can see. Okay. 10 seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your card up. Hold your card up. Show everyone around you your beautiful house. Fantastic. Okay. Show the people behind you. Fantastic. Okay, I need your attention again. The assessor, the non-artist in the group, is going to mark your house out of 10 using this mark scheme. Okay? So assessors, no changing houses. Do not change your house. You're not allowed. Okay, I need your attention. I need your attention. Mark your partners. And on your card, write the score. Write your partner's score on your card. No cheating. Do not cheat.
I have got it, it's imaginary, come on. Put the mark.
Okay. Okay, 5,
You are not correct.
4, 3, 2, 1.
No objection.
I need everyone's attention because now the competitiveness starts, okay? Who got 10 out of 10? Oh, I think this is unsuccessful. Who got 9 out of 10? 1. Hold up your card. Show it to everybody. Fantastic. So we have 1 gold star. Who got 8 out of 10? Ooh, this isn't good. Who got 7 out of 10? 1 person. Oh, I must be the worst teacher ever. This is dreadful. Who got 6 out of 10? 1. Oh, forget it. This is a disaster. I've absolutely set you up to fail, okay? There are lots of things I should have done before telling you how to draw your house. What should I have done?
To warn beforehand.
To warn you beforehand, yeah. Well, exactly, yeah. So, I'm upside down. Sorry. As the assessor, what should I have done? Well, first of all, I should have warned you. You're getting a test. Assessment criteria. I should have given you some guidelines as to how you would be assessed. I should have assessed how much you know about houses and how much you know about drawing houses. Clearly we have 3 A-star students who are amazing and should be architects and they know houses inside out. But I went in cold, I went in blind, okay? I should have modelled an example, at least give you some sort of model, even if it's a general or vague model, and then you have something to aim to. You have a goal, a target, and it helps you raise your standards, and by the end of the lesson, I can say, yes, my students hit those targets. But what happened was, I failed as a teacher, and you felt, oh, I got 2 out of 10, how awful. I'm useless at drawing houses, okay? So, by doing these 3 things, I'm ensuring that my students, you guys, know that I'm not trying to trick you. And this is how we approach assessment in ATC. We don't want to trick the students. It's not about this competitiveness of marking, percentages. It's about how to push them forward. So here's a little cartoon. I taught Stripe how to whistle. I don't hear him whistling. I said I taught him. I didn't say he learnt it. So I want you to talk with the person next to you for 1 minute about how you know your students are learning and progressing. What do you do in class? Tests, assessments, what do you do? Okay, 1 minute, off you go.
Test all the time.
We're learning
Test them before the lesson.
Test them to death.
Check their phone.
Some principles behind writing
Learning and progress.
for exhibitions and this we're going to write weekly. And I can compare actually. And I can see the program quite clearly.
Okay, 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Tests for grammar, reading, listening, and
Not good with photos. Okay, 3, 2, 1. I want somebody, one person, to tell me how you know your students are progressing. Yeah?
It very much depends on what we are testing.
Okay.
It could be just a test. It could be some creative task based on what we have learned.
Okay.
So and also set criteria and some things like this.
Okay.
And first of all, before giving a final test, we need to do some tasks where giving students an opportunity to show what they have learned in different ways.
Okay. All right.
Make mistakes. Give them opportunity to make mistakes.
Fantastic. Yeah. So allow them to make mistakes and then build on them. I heard somebody down here. Tests, and more tests.
No, that was a joke.
Good joke.
Okay.
There might be presentations and their like production of the lesson, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And some tests like 1 per month or something to check what they get and so on.
Okay. And what did the students receive after their assessment? ABC points. Okay. Percentages, points, grades. Okay. So usually, this is what we do. If you're assessing communicative or creative tasks, you're going to be asking them questions. You might be evaluating in the middle or the end of tasks if they're chatting to each other. You might be trying to get them to explain why they're giving you that answer. And we give them tests. We test them all the time to see where they are, what their level is. But what I want to talk about today is the difference between assessment of learning and assessment for learning. So I want you to talk for 1 minute with the person next to you. What is the difference? Assessment of learning and assessment for learning. Off you go, 1 minute.
Well, I think that in the first one, assessment of learning, they register the way to assess their progress. They check their progress, and I'm not very keen on points and scores. Yeah, I usually do assessment in a very different fashion. Points seen as writing percentages and numbers. Yeah, language is not involved.
Knowledge is not there.
But nonetheless, it's a very popular thing these days. And assessment for learning, I think it's an integral part. So assessment for learning to see the weak points and to know something else, not only assessment in itself.
Probably the difference that like checking the assessment team students
So it's easiest way, and it's easier for teacher and their students. Yeah. And this to me
teacher
is like
what
I really
Okay,
need
so I'm going to get one person to give me their idea. So one person to tell me what's the difference between assessment of learning and assessment for learning. Anybody?
So maybe the second means that we
the study further is absolutely part of it, yeah. Anything else? Yes, for learning.
So what
Yeah.
comes first? Assessment of learning is final test.
Yeah, exactly. So assessment of learning is assessing what they've learned up to now. So we've just done a term, now I'm going to assess you. But assessment for learning is exactly what you said, it's thinking about the future. An assessment for learning doesn't have to be at the end of a week, doesn't even have to be at the end of a lesson. It should be systematically throughout your lesson, checking. Where are they now? Are they ready to move on to the next part? Do they know what they have to do to move on to the next part of the task? Assessment of learning is very much grades. How do you get from 95 to 100? Assessment for learning, in its pure sense, should be absolutely formative, not summative. It should be completely grade-free. And as somebody mentioned earlier, where did I hear ego testing? So I'm looking for a speaker, but I can't remember who it was. But assessment of learning is where you get fantastic, A+. But assessment for learning is more about what do we do to get to the next level. So, assessment for learning is a huge part of, especially in the UK, it's a huge part of the state school system. And it's also gradually making its way into the Irish state school system. But unfortunately, what they've done is they've added grades to it. So when you go into a high school or secondary school in state schools in the UK or Ireland, they may say, I'm a 4.5, but I know I have to get to a 5. And what they've done is they've turned assessment for learning into assessment of learning. So they've had the opposite effect. William and Black, I'll send you the references at the end, came out a few years ago and said this is exactly the opposite of what we wanted. What we wanted was students to start thinking critically about how they learn, not about where they are on a scale of marks. They don't, that's not what they wanted. So, the next few slides that I'm going to go through are some practical tips on how you can integrate assessment for learning regularly, systematically, and routinely into lessons, because it is a very strange thing for students to do. You turn the student into the teacher, and they very much become self-assessors. So you need to tip their toe in the water, so to speak. You ease them into it and you train them, and then you do it over and over, and suddenly it's second nature to them. But they're not thinking about grades. They're thinking about how their English is progressing and what they actually have to do to progress their English. So if you think back to the start of my presentation, we had targeted aims. Students setting their own goals. By using all, most, and some, you're acknowledging that your students are different levels in the class. In an intermediate class in ATC, we might have someone who just joined intermediate, and we might have someone who's halfway through the intermediate course. So the teachers have to differentiate their lessons to make sure that they're hitting all their students' needs. So you're acknowledging the class of different needs, but more importantly, you're allowing your students to decide which aim they'll meet. And as you know, if you teach children or you teach teenage students, they love that sense of achievement when they've done something that they didn't expect. So if they choose the all aim, which is very general and quite easy to hit, they'll hit it and they'll feel okay. They'll think, that's great, I hit my aim for today. But if they exceed that aim and they go to the most or the some aim, they're going to feel fantastic, and they'll really see the progression in their English, and they'll feel like they're motivated in learning. So targeted aims are a really useful and very easy technique to use to keep your students on track and to remind your students what they're doing throughout the lesson. It's always good as well to refer back to your aims. So if you remember our first aim today, the general one, the easy one, is that you'll have an overview of assessment for learning by the end, okay? But then the more complicated aim, some of you will want to look into this more because this is just the surface. You might want to do some research and work it into your overall methodology. So bouncing, and this links very closely. You'll think I was in cahoots with Connor down the back, because this links very closely with what Connor was talking about with challenge. Assessment for learning is very much linked to challenge, and it's very much linked to demand-high teaching. Demand-high teaching is something that came about through Scrivener and Underhill, those two celebrities in EFL, talking over a cup of tea and saying, well, they're killing the question. When I observe lessons, the teacher is saying, what's the answer? Excellent. Next question. What's the answer? Excellent. Next question. So think about bouncing, and this is very much part of assessment for learning. You're seeing how far you can push your students. How much can they do? When a student answers a question, rather than saying excellent or correct, you're going to bounce it around the room like a ball. So Laura, what did you think of Paul's answer? Okay. Simon, how can you change Laura's answer to add more detail or make it more accurate? Anna, can you repeat Simon's answer using correct stress patterns? So you're not just asking one thing, you're linking and recycling lots and lots of things that they've learned before. And you're training your students so that they know, when I answer this question, she's going to ask for more, I know it. So how can I make it as good as I can? How can I put as much detail in as I can? Now at the beginning of the term, your students might think, oh, this is awful. But believe me, at the end of a term, they're going to feel very confident and they're going to be used to this and they'll be trained. So, incorrect discussion, and lots of people have spoken about this today. It's a huge thing in English language teaching. Mistakes are absolutely okay. Now, in observations, we often see lots of people doing error correction and error correcting one-on-one, and that's fantastic. But this is something that you could link if you hear an error related to one of your main aims. Don't be afraid to linger on that error. If it's something integral to what you're trying to teach, like onomatopoeia, linger on the error. And write the incorrect answer on the board, but don't tell them the correct answer. Get them then to work in pairs and systematically work through, why is that incorrect? If you're happy for them to use devices, allow them to use their devices. If it's a pronunciation error, stop them and say, okay, everybody, put that word into your device and listen to how it sounds. Say it to each other, and then tell me what was the error. Where did it go wrong? So adjusting and improving, but most of all spotting the mistake, is a huge thing for students to learn. And this links very closely with Connor's presentation this morning, where he was talking about deep cognitive thought. That helps people remember, and it helps them hold in what they need to know. And it draws the learning process out into the open, and it allows students to recognize that errors are fantastic. It's the best way they're going to learn. You can absolutely bet your bottom dollar this is not the first time I've done this presentation. Lots of practice. So another really nice thing to do is redrafting. So giving students a second chance. This is not just connected with writing. This is connected with any task at all. Any task. So don't just complete a task once, correct it and move on. In real life, we practice, we go over things, we try again, we improve every time we try. And there's nothing wrong with lingering on one task in a lesson if it's an integral task to what you're trying to teach your students. Allow the students to try the task once. Then you can gather feedback from the students. And they can peer assess how they did, what could they add, is there anything they could do better. They could even do this in small groups rather than as a whole class, where they feel more comfortable speaking to each other. Get students to peer assess their first attempts or their first drafts, and then allow them to try the same task again. Okay? Then get them to compare. Why was it so much better the second time round? What did I do that really pushed the standard of my English higher? Well, in my first task I repeated nice about 50 times. In the second task I used lots of different adjectives to make it more detailed, sound more natural. So here's an example of redrafting. Students use their devices to record an unprepared dialogue on a topic that they're familiar with. So ordering food in a restaurant or talking about hobbies. They get no preparation time. Students then play their recordings back, either to the class or in groups, and they decide how they can be improved, so they work on it. And then they write a full dialogue, they put in all their improvements, and they think about what will make that better. How are they going to sound better? And then they record their better dialogue, their new and improved dialogue, and they analyse those improvements. So that's an example of redrafting and how it can be used with spoken English, not just written English. And you can experiment like this with almost any task. Collaboration is a really important thing for, as you can see, what I've been building up to, for assessment for learning to work, for you to understand what your students need, and for your students to understand what they need. It's very important that there's a creative, supportive environment and collaboration is encouraged. And this is going to take a little bit of training. You do need to train your students into how to do this. So train your students how to peer assess and how to give constructive feedback. Because you don't want a classroom of teenagers going, rubbish, that was absolutely terrible, and being mean to each other. You want them to be very focused and do it properly. Another example of encouraging collaboration is when you ask a question to the class, give the student some think time to process that question, and then encourage the student to talk through their answer with their partner. It's going to give them confidence and it's going to make their answer better. 5 minutes left. Okay. And invite stronger students to teach aspects of language in small groups. So micro-teaching is really good for that, okay? So student content is one of the most effective things you can use, okay? They use their own questions on a topic or their own questions on a language point. They become the teacher, okay? So your students can even make up their own exam questions as a practice, not for the real thing. So your students, if they're taking the first certificate or the IELTS, you can always give them a reading passage and tell them, what questions do you think the examiner is going to ask you? And that puts the student into teacher mode and it deepens their cognitive thought. They're thinking from a teacher's point of view. And we know that when you teach from a teacher's point of view, when you think from a teacher's point of view, you will not forget. You always remember what you teach. So that's really, really useful for assessment for learning. A really good one. Students set up their own mark schemes, so they're assessing what's valuable. What does the examiner want from me? What's really valuable in this answer? How much detail should I give? What vocabulary should I use? So they set up their own mark scheme and give them a choice. Student choice is massive, and when you do these things, you're creating naturally learner autonomy, and it's getting easier and easier for the students. Assessment and reflection, self-assessment and reflection is what we've been talking about the whole time. So I'm going to focus on plenaries and mini plenaries. So you're going to have a plenary. So your plenary is to think about what you got from this session. So think back to this. What you know about assessment for learning, what you want to know about assessment for learning, and now you don't need to share it, just think about it. What have you learned about assessment for learning? Okay? So what is assessment for learning all about? It's about allowing your students to track their own progress. They see what they have to do. You are giving them the tools to check understanding mid-lesson and even mid-task. You're asking them, who feels confident? Who feels confident with the vocabulary? Who feels they have the best vocabulary in the class? And the hands go up. It's guiding your students on what steps they need to take, guiding your students on what steps they need to take for further progression, and really importantly for you, successful lessons. It's getting you to understand what you need to plan for future lessons. It's not just a lesson, it's a lesson for your students, targeted directly at your students. So what objectives have you met? It's your turn to do your thumbs, okay? So this is, yes, I am fantastic, I've met that objective. Nah, and oh, you're kidding me. No, I don't know what you're talking about, okay? So, all teachers will gain an overview of AFL techniques. If you feel you've met that objective, put your thumb up. Oh dear. So we'll try again. All teachers will gain an overview of AFL techniques. If you feel you didn't, put your thumb down. Okay, yeah, no, that's okay, that's okay. It's all right. AFL is huge. There's so much to it, okay? Most teachers will try today's techniques in future lessons. That's a good amount of thumbs. Okay, I'm happy with that. And finally, some teachers will feel confident conducting further research into AFL. Woo! Yes! Fantastic! Top of the class, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you for being fantastic participants. I see I have 1 minute left, so I'd like to take that minute to just give you an overview of ATC, language schools. So most of you are probably aware that we have 3 year-round adult schools in Dublin, Bray, and in the south of England in Winchester, which is just an hour from London. But I know you're all focused on younger learners, so I want to draw your attention to our 9 summer centres that are in Ireland. So we have 6 around Dublin, and then we have Galway, Limerick, Kilkenny, and Cork, okay? And our junior summer centres are comprehensive programmes that include full board accommodation, 15 hours of lessons per week, sports programme, half-day excursions and full-day excursions. And what I want to do is draw your attention to Maynooth University. So all our summer centres are based on either university campuses or they're based on private boarding school campuses. And we chose these specifically for the fantastic facilities that they have. So Maynooth University is located in the most beautiful town. It's a historical town, just 25 minutes outside Dublin. Everything the students do is on campus, so they eat there, they live there, they have their lessons there, and they have their sports activities and their drama and Irish sports, anything that they're going to do, it's all on campus. Then when they're going on their trips into Dublin or across Ireland, they get a private coach transfer to do that. So it's really nicely contained, it's in a beautiful environment, and they're getting 15 hours per week of lessons. But on top of those 15 hours, they're also getting 1 afternoon of World of Work. So the World of Work lecture is based on entering the work life. So it's about writing CVs, applying for jobs, communicating well in jobs. How do you speak on the phone? How do you write an email? How do you write an email to your colleague versus how do you write your email to your boss? How do you sound polite in the workplace? But it also has lots of creative aspects as well, like advertising and marketing and giving presentations. So it's a nice little extra for them. So, time is over. Time's up. So thank you very much for taking part. You were excellent participants, and I hope to see you in 2017.